Hey, what's up, everybody? We're going to talk about resources for bill writing because I do not want you to Wikipedia, Google, web crawl, bang your way through this thing. It's important that you guys get some legit research going, and the best place to do that is by going to our USGP website, and you can start with bill writing headquarters. So, bill writing headquarters basically has everything you need for bill writing. Um, but I want to show you where some better resources are. So, how to write a bill, the Cliff Notes that we've been going over is here. A final bill checklist is here. So, you can kind of use this like, did we do what needs to be done? Is our bill up to snuff? Because this is kind of how you're being assessed, right? And then some other stuff that you can ignore. Okay, so that's there. Just be aware of it. Research and citations is where you want to be. Again, try and live in this world up here. If you're looking at media sources, specifically when we're dealing with some COVID 19, you might want to be living there because the further you get down in this general area, the more crackpotty, like, the world's ending type of stuff you're going to be getting. So try and stay away from there. Okay, so the places I want to take you to, and sorry you can't see all of this right now because once you click on it, it turns it white, which is not ideal since we have a white background. But you can see that there is Wisconsin State Assembly bills, Wisconsin State agencies, GovTrack federal bills, A to Z list of federal agencies by department, and Congressional Budget Office. Okay, these are going to be very helpful when writing your introduction, Section 1, Section 2, and Section 3, which is kind of like the bulk of what you're doing. So for Section 1, which is the solution, you could like create the wheel from scratch, right? Write this thing in your own words without having any idea of what's already been done on your legislation or on your problem. What I would recommend is don't do that. Take things that have been proposed by Congress, and if you like it, use it. If you don't like it, change it. So whatever your problem is, somebody somewhere has made this their life's work. Some agencies, some think tank, some congressperson has proposed a solution to the problem that you are talking about, okay? Unless it is a very, very unique problem. So if you have a federal bill, why don't you go to GovTrack and see what other laws have been written and proposed by the federal government? So if you are dealing with, I don't know, let's say education, you can see what bills are currently being proposed and debated or recently have been proposed and debated relation to education. So you can see this top bill that comes up is sponsored by yours truly, Senator Ron Johnson from the good old state of Wisconsin. Is called the Luke and Alex School Safety Act of 2019. So you can click on it and you can see the entire text, right? So you can see what it reads like, who sponsored it. You can see that it's sponsored by Ron Johnson and whatever Scott and Marco Rubio from Florida. And here it is, an act, blah, 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 blah. Best practices. I don't know. It looks like they want to install best practices and recommendations for school safety for use by state and local educational agencies, institutions of higher education, state and local law enforcement. Da, 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 da. So the federal government is trying to get involved in school safety, apparently, is what we're looking at here. Anyway, the point being is if you happen to be doing some school safety legislation, you could use ideas in here if you think they're good, because this is not currently a law, okay? And you know that because it says right now that it has not been voted on. It was sent to the House or Senate as a whole consideration on November 6, 2019, and that is the status of that. So it is in committee, or at least has been assigned to a committee and hasn't been passed into law. And it looks like there's not a very high chance of it actually passing. So you could use this sort of place to look for bills that are similar to your ideas, at least, and try and use some of their language to make your bill more authentic and to actually eliminate loopholes for things that are out there. Okay. Now, you could definitely just search like gun regulation legislation and see what you find. Okay, so now the first results here are not super awesome. Geez, a lot of them aren't. So the Council on Foreign Policy, though, is pretty dope. And so I would recommend maybe taking a look at them. But again, anytime you Google anything, always be very conscious of what it is that you're looking at, what the source is. Is it authentic? Is it good? Is it fake? Is it going to be academic and trustworthy? And so just use your judgment there. Okay. If you're doing a state law, you're going to want to make sure that you go to the Wisconsin State Assembly bills and do the same thing. Like, look at what bills are there. Is there anything that's similar to yours? Could you use this as a resource to help your bill group out? So it's going to take some digging, and that's the whole point of this. Is a lot of what you're going to be doing is like finding things, perusing it, skimming it, and being like, "Yep, can't use it." Toss it aside. That's just the nature of research. Other times you're going to find like gems, and you're going to be super excited, and your world's going to be a lot better. Okay. The next thing that's really significant is this Congressional Budget Office. It's called the CBO. And basically, their entire objective is to just look at laws that are proposed or have been passed and tell Congress this is what it's actually going to cost. If you do this, here is the price tag for this. Okay. So, HR 6074, Coronavirus Preparedness and Response Supplemental Appropriations Act 2020. And so, this was posted on the website of the House Appropriations Committee on March 4th, 2020. Basically, they are, and you can look at the legislation, it links directly to congress.gov. But if we want to view the document, it tells you what this is going to cost in millions of dollars over the course of however many years. So, the grand price tag on this thing, it looks like, is $77 billion, whatever this bill was going to do, which was to provide supplemental appropriations for federal agencies. So this is money just for the federal government to respond to the coronavirus. Okay. So this is where you can go to get and find similar legislation to your own. And you can see potentially what costs would be and where they get those estimates from. So it's a fun website to play around on, especially if you want to know like what things cost in general. And I know somebody's doing like raise the federal minimum wage, lower the federal minimum wage. Looks like a good interactive tool for that, and so on and so forth. Okay. Other than that, I think the only thing I would point your attention to is government agencies. Okay, so the White House for implementation is probably going to be a place to go to sort of see what agencies exist for the executive branch, because the executive branch executes the laws, right? So executing the law basically says we take this law that has been passed by Congress and signed by the president, and we're going to make sure it is done. Okay, so we're going to give it to a very specific agency to implement. Okay, so if it's under the purview of education, it's going to go to the Department of Education, right? So if it's related to funding defense, it's going to go to the Department of Defense. And so when you go to the White House's website, you're looking for, wow, hey, so again, this is telling you where the emphasis of the White House currently is located. You want to look at executive offices. So they change this every time the president comes in. I would imagine under the cabinet, you'll get a sense of where the executive offices are. Yeah, so we got the Department of Education, Department of Defense, Department of Commerce, Department of Energy, Department of Health and Human Services, and so on and so forth. So if your bill pertains to gun control, maybe that falls under the Department of Education. Maybe it falls underneath the Department of Homeland Security. Maybe it falls underneath the Department of Health and Human Services. You kind of got to do some looking and a little bit of research to figure out what exactly they are in charge of. If you're doing high-speed rail, maybe it's the Department of Transportation. So you would look at the Department of Transportation's website, and then you would maybe determine, like, I don't know, is there a sub-agency within here that is going to, deal with this more specifically? So we have the Federal Aviation Administration, we got the Federal Highway Administration, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, the Federal Railroad Administration. So potentially maybe that would deal with high-speed rail. And so you just gotta kind of look through and kind of think to yourself, what does my solution have to do with? Is there a department where this fits? And then what is the sub agency that maybe potentially would deal with this? So you got to do some research, but now you have the tools to do that. When in doubt, when it comes to cost and funding or anything else, if you can basically explain how you came to come up with the idea and the implementation or the agency, like this is how I connected these dots, this is how we got to the Federal Aviation Administration, or this is how we got to $70 billion, or this is how we got to whatever. That's all we're asking for, is tell us within reason how you determined what the best solution to this problem was, who's going to implement it, and what it's going to cost. Okay? As long as there is a logical train of thought that makes sense and is logistically sound and based in good research, you will be fine. If you have any questions, consult the website. Good luck, everybody.